let's open up with a good prayer. All right, so we pray. Speak, O Lord, to your servants here, and show us your ways that we may gain Christ and be found in Him, not having a righteousness of our own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ. Because your word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. So give us life, O Lord, according to your word. Bless our study. Amen.
Amen. You know,
all right. So,
cool. I don't know how
we have a new handout today.
Yeah, I'll give you that one because I only got two. I'll let you see one.
So, just one sheet. It's gonna on one side it's gonna say Introduction to the 7 Ecumenical Councils, and on the other side is a timeline and kind of just a little chart about those.
Hi there.
All right, so today we'll.
It hasn't gone around yet.
Today we're going to jump into to the 7 Ecumenical Councils and talk about this a little bit. If we have time, we're going to we'll start talking about the first as well. Just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of where we're going. So the plan is to talk about one of these, maybe two at the most, over the next several weeks. So each week we'll just kind of take a new one at a time. There's a couple that aren't quite as important as the others, and so we might be able to talk about both of them in the same day. So we're going to go through these seven councils, and these range timeline-wise from 325 to 787. Okay, 325 to 787. So I'll try to fill in some of the gaps as well on some of the historical events, a little, particularly in the Roman world, but then after Rome falls and kind of what happened. So we'll go through this. We might back up after we get through all of them, back up and spend some time as well trying to kind of catch up. After we get through this stuff here, then we're going to take a little bit of a look at Charlemagne, okay, and why he's important, both historically, but as well as to the Christian church. And then we'll just start moving forward. Eventually, shortly after that, we'll jump to the split between the East and the West. That happens in 1054. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about what leads up to that, and why that happens, and then the continuing significance of that as well. Okay. Then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the Crusades. Okay. And some of that, the medieval church during that time period as well. Okay. So that's kind of where we're going over the next few months. That'll probably take us that long to get through all that. So, unless you guys want to speed up, and we can certainly speed up. So, today I just kind of want to do a brief introduction to these councils, what they are, and their importance, significance to the church. To the broader Christian church, not just to us. So we'll take just take a look at an introduction to this, and we'll just do we'll look at that chart just briefly, so you get an idea of when and where they were, and just the main topics that they talk about. So the first thing. These are called the 7 Ecumenical Councils. So there's 7 of them, right? And you have the word ecumenical, which is an important word that doesn't mean now what it meant then. Okay? So, ecumenical, for most of history, this word points to a church that's universal. So it's a gathering of Christians from east and west around God's Word. So that's really when we say the Ecumenical Councils, or we'll talk about the 3 ecumenical creeds. What we're talking about when we say ecumenical is this isn't regulated just to a certain language or a certain geography, but this is kind of worldwide, Christian-wide, universal. Okay? So, initially this word was just a very common word in the Greek and Roman world that just referred to an association of like-minded individuals that work for common goals. Okay? So, eventually, an ecumenical council came to refer to a synod. We'll talk about that in a second. A synod, the decrees of which have found acceptance by the church and the whole world. Okay? So that's basically how we're going to talk about an ecumenical council. Synod is a strange word that gets defined differently and used differently. Synod is a word that means, literally means that you're walking together. Okay? Or maybe in step. Right? So if you're walking with somebody, say if you and your spouse, you're holding hands and you're walking down the street and you guys are literally in step, right? Taking the same steps at the same time. So that's the kind of, so walking together, again, it's associated with these like-minded individuals who are working for common goals. In other words, they're going the same direction, right? You don't have one trying to pull the other in a different way. Okay? So, that's what a synod means. So it's been used in a lot of different ways. Okay, so the way that we usually use it as Lutherans and part of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, right, is a synod. Then where these like-minded individuals and churches, right, that are walking together. And we're like-minded because we share the same beliefs. Okay? So that's what a synod is supposed to be. So for us, right, the synod it's a voluntary association of walking together with other congregations who say we believe the same things and we're working together for the common goal. Okay? So, whenever we get to Lutheranism, historically, Lutheranism and then Lutheranism in America, we'll talk about the various synods and how and why some of those synods got started and merged and split and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so we'll get there in that regard. Okay. So that's kind of how we talk about a synod, right? So a synod means, and it's kind of then a smaller version of then a denomination, right? So you have various synods within Lutheranism, okay? So we have the Missouri Synod, you have the Wisconsin Synod, you have the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, you have, on the smaller side, you have the Evangelical Lutheran Synod, which is in fellowship with the Wisconsin Synod. You have the Association of American Lutheran Churches, which is in fellowship with us. And there's some other, there's the Church of the Lutheran Confession, which is like, there's one called Eldona, Evangelical Lutheran Diocese of North America. There's the Lutheran Church of North America. I mean, so there's a whole bunch. There's a whole bunch.
Which one is there one that's Scandinavian? Because I attended one of those churches once and I forgot.
Well, there's lots that are Scandinavian.
Oh, there's the littler one.
The ELCA comes out of
Not
the
that
Scandinavian church.
More conservative.
Not that one.
The Evangelical Lutheran Synod is primarily as a Norwegian background.
Which one again?
The Evangelical Lutheran Synod, ELS.
I think that's it.
So that was Norwegian. The AALC is mostly Swedish.
Okay.
And the Swedes that didn't join become the ELC. So I'll give you a big family tree. Because it's complex and it's changing all the time.
Yeah.
So most of the, in America, most of the Lutheran church bodies are either have Germanic origins or Scandinavian. Okay, so that's kind of how we use the word synod. Synod, though, has also been used in the same sense as a council, okay, or a gathering of people. So the Roman Catholic Church makes this distinction. So a council is basically discusses theological issues, and a synod discusses more ethical issues, or something along like how you do things. So synod is a little more practical, and the council is a little more theological. All those two kind of blend together a lot. Okay. So the synod is just more on a local scale. It's usually smaller and addressing a specific issue that's originally, and the council is broader. So that's how the Roman Catholics use the word. Anglicans kind of do a similar thing as well. So, okay, next. Modern Roman Catholics have redefined what an ecumenical council is. And when I mean redefined, they literally changed the definition in the 1960s. Okay? So, the quote I gave you first about how it's the synod decrees of which have been found acceptance by the church in the whole world was basically the definition of an ecumenical council for 1700 years. Okay? Until the 1960s, where the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and we have Vatican II, a big Roman Catholic Council, that changes simplicity. Now this is what they say. Ecumenical councils are those to which the bishops and others entitled to vote are convoked from the whole world under the presidency of the Pope or his legates, and the decrees of which, having received papal confirmation, bind all Christians. Okay, so this completely redefines things, and what it does is it places everything under the authority of the Pope. Okay, and as we're going to see as we go throughout this, the Pope is not present at most of these. He does not even necessarily have representatives present. And while he does agree, this is the last note on this page, none of the ecumenical councils are dependent upon the presence, the consent, or knowledge of the Bishop of Rome, though he agreed. So his agreement, what they changed the definition to say his agreement validates the council. Whereas most of history, this is still a big issue between the Eastern Christians, the Orthodox, and the Roman Catholic Church, as well as us, is we're fine with the Pope being the Bishop of Rome and even the head of that church body, but his authority doesn't extend over everybody. Just like I'm the pastor of Zion Lutheran Church, I don't really have the right to go over to Grace Lutheran Church in Caldwell and start telling them how to do things. Because I'm not their pastor, right? And so, no, it wouldn't go over. Now, we're in agreement, that church and us, so that we say we believe the same things, right? And we're walking together and doing towards the same goal to promote the same gospel, right? But we don't encroach on each other's territories in that sense, right? And my authority doesn't extend to it. So, the Catholics changed, the Roman Catholics changed things. Now, in this as well, so they say it's convoked under the presidency of the Pope, which historically just isn't true. And the Catholics, the Roman Catholics, acknowledge that that's not really the case. Okay? But that's why they have Ores Legates, which really isn't true. But and then they say, and the decrees of which having received papal confirmation, right, as if the Pope is the one that makes it true. Okay? Then he says, bind all Christians, not bind all Roman Catholics, but bind all Christians. So there again, now the Pope is exerting authority where it doesn't belong, and saying that these decrees are binding on all Christians.
It's not too binding. When was the first bishop pope?
I'd say Gregory the Great, really, I think 500, around 500.
I know there was
Yeah.
contest between Jesus and the last.
Right. So the Pope, kind of in the modern sense, think around the year 500. There's always been, the Pope is just the Bishop of Rome. Okay. And maybe we can talk. We'll talk about this sometime. So, there are different regions in the Roman Empire. So think kind of, not quite like a state, but more like a judicial jurisdiction. So more akin to like maybe a county, parish, something like that, okay? And in the Roman world, that's called diocese, which is where the Roman Catholic Church just takes that because they say the Roman world's already organized according to these jurisdictional areas, right? So we're going to kind of, and they're centered around the largest cities in the area, right? So that's kind of just like you have the county seat, right? That's where the courthouse all are and where kind of official things take place, right? So kind of the same idea is that kind of thing. So the Roman Catholic Church, and a lot of the church before, while Rome was still going, they just say, look, these things are already set up, so we're just going to use the same boundaries for the most part. Okay? And then the bishop is the one so you have congregations, right? And you have congregation. I should have written all this stuff out for you guys. I'm trying to do that. Okay. So you have this threefold office, okay, or this threefold positions. You have one office of the ministry, the pastoral ministry. Now, to make things work and function well, we saw this in Acts, right, where the apostles appoint deacons, right, so that they can the apostles can devote themselves to the ministry of the word, and the deacons can help with serving the tables. Although you see some of the deacons preaching and baptizing and doing that stuff too. Okay? So from the very early on, what you see is these men are all ordained into the one office. But then there's different distinctions and responsibilities as they're divided up. Okay. So when they start to do that, now as Christianity starts to grow, then you also have the addition of what's called a bishop, which means an overseer. So the bishop is kind of the pastor of a group of pastors. Okay. So in the city of Rome, if you have 12 congregations in the early church, and they say we need help communicating and coordinating and making sure things were working together and not against each other. One of the pastors is kind of elected to say we want you to take on that kind of administrative role, and now be the pastor of all of these other pastors and priests who each have deacons assisting them kind of in that day-to-day stuff. So that gets started very, very early on. So there ends up being 5 major centers. And I know I've talked about this sometime, but it's probably not so. There are 5 major centers of Christianity in the early church. There's Rome, Antioch, Syria, Alexandria in Egypt, Jerusalem, and Constantinople. So these are the 5 big areas, in a large part because these were the major metropolitan areas. Okay, so it's a city. So each of these 5 places had a bishop. Okay, so And from early on, they all considered themselves equal because there's only one office of the pastor. So the differences are differences of responsibility, not of rank. Okay. Over time, though, you can see how this idea of rank starts to seep into it. Okay, so then where the bishop is somehow higher and has more authority and better than the priest, it's more than the deacon. Okay? So you start to have that just in a more local context, but then you start to have the Bishop of Rome tell the other 4 bishops, I'm now, the same thing that the Roman emperor says, right? I am now the first among equals.
This is a keeping in the spirit of Jesus, which needs to be with great.
Right. Yeah, very much so. To which the other 4 say, no, you're not.
And they fall in the same spirit.
Yeah. So, okay, so that's Rome, Antioch, Alexandria, Jerusalem, and Constantinople. So the Bishop of Rome starts to exert his authority, or perceived authority, and start to say, I'm now the first among equals. I am over everything. And the others say no. And this ends up being a centuries-long complex argument, squabble. But this is part of what leads to the division between East and West as well. Is the East finally is fed up with it and saying, you keep saying you're the head of everything and you're doing everything even now, even without consent of anybody else. And so everybody excommunicates each other.
But the Fourth Crusade didn't help.
No, it didn't. Right. So we'll talk about that more when we get there. The Crusades, especially the 4th one in particular, doesn't help at all, where you have Western Christians basically ransacking the East and doing a lot of really bad things. So, general idea, Crusades are bad. I mean, there's a lot of sinful and bad things. There was some okay motivation initially behind the start of it, as in terms of a defensive war, and then the sinfulness of people quickly get away, and it goes nuts. So, and then so we'll talk about that when we get more to the divide between the East and the West. Okay. The point is the Roman Catholic Church is still trying to exert this kind of authority over all Christians, not just those who are in the Roman Catholic Church. So when they say, when the Roman Catholic Church determined 150-ish years ago that that Mary was a little bit more special, right? And bodily assumed, so she doesn't die. She's just sins up in the head in her body, and that Mary herself is sinless. What this says is that is binding on all Christians, right? Which means you and I sin by not believing that, believing what the church told us.
How did they determine that Mary was
Well, we'll get there later.
We haven't really started.
Yeah, so this is a gradual, so back to the Pope, hold on a second. The Pope, it takes a long time. It takes hundreds of years for this to happen, before the Pope, and constantly the Bishop of Rome is trying to exert his authority over the whole church. And so there's a power struggle, and a lot of it's politics, unfortunately. Because that seems to be. So Steve first.
So at the same time, though, we're just beginning to form the states of Europe, right, are all being formed at the same, at this time
not really. No,
Well, they don't have established countries yet, right?
no, during the time we're talking about way back when, no.
No, they don't have that.
No, in fact, I mean, you can't, depends on how you define things, but, I mean, this is partly where Charlemagne comes into play. But, I mean, our modern idea of nation states, especially in Europe, doesn't really exist until, well, I mean, England is a little different, England and Ireland, because they're islands off. But mainland Europe, it's more some ethnic and language based. You have your natural geographical boundaries, rivers, mountains, that kind of stuff. But it's constantly shifting. So it's not really fair to say, in the year 1000, Germany, because that's,
So what I'm alluding to is the authority of the Pope, and once he becomes established, he establishes himself over the state as far as the empire goes. In other words,
no,
he doesn't establish
not
himself.
until Charlemagne.
Okay, what I'm saying, but he does
Yeah.
do it eventually.
Yeah,
That's
not
what-
until Charlemagne.
Okay, so Charlemagne.
Do you really see the beginnings of that?
Okay.
I mean, there's, Carrie
I just
first.
wanted to ask what the Eastern Orthodox Church is at this time. Because I know there's a split, but is it not split yet?
It's not split yet.
Okay.
1054 is when that
1054,
split
okay,
happens. Yeah.
Because I'm looking at all these centers, and none of them is like Russia, so that's what I was
Right,
really wondering.
yeah, because that doesn't happen until around the year 1000.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm jumping ahead.
And that's why the war in Ukraine and Russia is such a big deal, too. Because it's not just about the USSR, it's about thousands of years of stuff, as well as we'll get there later.
No, nation states started to emerge after the end of the 30-year war.
Okay.
48. Something like that. That's the state outcome.
Yeah.
At the end of the 30-year war.
After the end of the
30 years war. So, and we'll get to some of that. I mean, as we go through, and this is why you're going to spend some time. So you have the fall of Rome, and then this is why Charlemagne is such a big deal, because then you have kind of the beginnings of the Holy Roman Empire, which the famous line goes wasn't holy, wasn't Roman, and wasn't really So, and that's what exists all the way through the Renaissance up to the Reformation, and then kind of after that, in the 30 Years' War, things start to change and shift.
What is the term see when they call it the Holy See?
This a seat,
they
the
did-
position of the authority.
Oh, because
A location.
when I've seen it written, it's just SEE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Holy See is the seat of the Bishop of Rome, which means the chair, the throne chair.
Okay.
Basically, that's just another kind of fancy parlance of saying this is coming from the top tier of the Roman Catholic hierarchy,
Okay.
from either the Pope or the Vatican. Yeah. Rob?
As these councils were meeting in these early parts to discuss these matters, were they looking at Old Testament mistakes that had happened, such as coming from Judges into 1 Samuel, where we start to bring on kings, and even though they were, God anointed them, they were still human and sinful, and the mistakes that happened there?
Well, I mean, by the time the first council comes around, the canon of Scripture is pretty much solidified, so that everybody, for the most part, everybody's using the same Bible now. By this time, and that's pretty universal. But there's constant, when you go back and read some of this stuff, there's constant referral to
Well, I'm just asking because they seem to center the power around one individual instead of around Christ Jesus, who's the head of the church.
Right.
And to make sure that they know that distinction, and who's actually in charge
Well, and
of the
this
church.
is, that might be something interesting to look at. So you have this idea, it's a little more prominent in Eastern Orthodoxy now, of Christus Rex, which is Christ the King. But the Roman Catholic Church too says, Christ is the King, and the Pope is his vicar on earth, which means his official representative. So, and there's only one of those. So, but yeah, it might be kind of interesting to trace, see if you can trace some of that stuff.
I didn't know who you were looking at.
Okay.
But regarding the Holy See, I don't know what that word meant either, but it did remind me that this is my understanding, that the Pope isn't necessarily speaking from that representation, vicar on earth role all the time, but if he speaks from his mercy seat, he is, but at other times he's not necessarily doing that.
Right.
There's a distinction in it.
Yeah, there is. Yes.
Well, right now in the news, isn't the Pope kind of stacking the group of cardinals?
Oh yeah, that always happens.
And then,
Yeah.
a lot of people like want something.
Yeah, that always happens. I mean, it's
So
there.
obvious.
No matter how hard you try, there's politics in church.
Yeah.
Yeah, any
Every
church, any church,
Our church.
and whether it's on the local
Yep.
or worldwide, it exists. And it, because we live with one foot in the world and one foot in the kingdom of God. And so you have to have some kind of earthly structure, right? And so the debate is, well, what kind do you use? What does it look like? And who has authority? What kind of authority? What kind of power? How far does that extend? So, and that's a big battle during the Reformation as well. Okay, is that good to see? So, okay, so a couple of big things before we go on here with this. First, kind of what Carrie said about the Pope kind of officially speaking. That's called ex cathedra. So from the cathedral. He's only done it twice in history, and it's both times been about Mary. Okay, so that doesn't happen very often. It's really, really rare. But we could say the kind of our idea of the Pope, of the way the Roman Catholic Church defines it now, and we kind of view it too, really starts around Gregory the Great in around 500. Okay, but it's also important to know and to recognize, and Roman Catholics will get really mad when we say this, but we view the Lutheran view is that the official Lutheran view is that the Roman Catholic Church as a denomination starts at the Reformation. Okay, so I'm not going to be talking about the church back here as the Roman Catholic Church. It's just the church. Okay. The Roman Catholic Church is born out of the Reformation, particularly the Council of Trent, which kind of goes for 15, 20 years after Luther's death until the 1560s. So it's just the church. So it's not historically accurate either to say there's the Roman Catholic Church before the 1500s.
Just a quick question. I've heard the term quite a bit, at least in Seattle where I grew up. They talked about the archbishop, and is he like a higher guy or has more synods?
The bishop is the head pastor in a diocese. The archbishop is the head pastor in an archdiocese. And the archdiocese is bigger.
Bigger. Okay.
That's all.
Okay, so he is a designation higher than just a regular bishop.
And then you have a Monsignor, and then you have
Tale of two cities.
cardinals, and
Society of Jesus.
oh, well, that's the Jesuits,
Yeah.
which was also born out of the Reformation. Jesuits are. Do you guys know why Jesuits? Why they got started? Two purposes. One of them is get rid of Lutherans.
Yeah.
That's why it was created, to reconvert or kill Lutherans.
Yep.
Yep. The second reason was to educate the pagans in the New World. Okay? So, that's why when you come over to South America, North America, especially where you have those Roman Catholic mission churches and everything set up, those are all Jesuit churches because they're the educational missionary force.
Isn't there that famous movie in the 70s, Missionary or something in South America?
Yeah.
I forget what that is, but I think I had a professor that was involved in that.
Yeah. There's been lots of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that was a Jesuit
Yeah.
thing.
So Jesuits are born out of an anti-Lutheran movement. That's one of the two original charters. They don't do too much of that now. Now they're mostly
That's good.
education and missionary. Okay, let's actually get back to this. So, okay, so nowadays, so this is how the Roman Catholics kind of define this word ecumenical. Nowadays, most Protestants define the term in the sense of a merger or cooperation among Christian denominations or congregations in unity and common association, often exhibited by joint worship in hopes of unity of belief. Okay, so that's taken off of the website from what's called the World Council of Churches, which is in the late 1800s. You have this worldwide, what's called the Ecumenical Conference, which seeks, their goal is to create unity among the different denominations of Christianity. Mostly by let's whittle it down to the lowest common denominator, and let's join and worship together in order to accomplish these tasks. Which is kind of it's a complete reversal to the way that almost exclusively every group in Christianity do unity and working with others up until that time. So, I mean, it would have been unheard of for a Calvinist to commune in a Lutheran church and a Lutheran to commune in a Calvinist church in the mid-1800s. I mean, and some of you guys still think about or probably remember this. You know, a mix for a lot of Lutheran churches historically, even up until, again, a lot of your guys' lifespan. A mixed marriage was a Lutheran and a Catholic.
Dad told me the only ones I couldn't marry were Catholics.
So it's in a large part, it's a let's agree to disagree position, and it downplays differences of belief and of practice. And so that's how a lot of modern Protestantism views it. So you almost have two extremes. So the Roman Catholic Church says it's all wrapped up in allegiance to the Pope, right? And Protestants, a lot of the Protestant churches say it's all just, you know, we're all good. Let's just agree to disagree and pretend like we're all, you know, that differences and nothing really matters. As long as you believe in Jesus, however you define belief in Jesus. Practice. So they've almost gone to two different extremes on what that looks like.
Doesn't that take away from the deity of Christ in saying it revolves around the Pope because he's a human?
Oh, sure it does. Sure it does.
Don't think.
Sure. Yeah. That's part of our problem.
Yeah.
So, I know this is kind of a long lead up to my point, so I apologize. But for conservative Lutherans, ecumenicism is based on unity of doctrine and confession. For it's only in and upon the Word of God that truth and unity in the body of Christ is present. Okay? So the Christian community was called together and formed by Christ based on faith in Him and in sacramental unity. So usually then, this is why I'm making all this things. Usually when we use the term ecumenical as Lutherans, we use it in a more historic sense as a universal unity of faith based on Scripture, based on Christ, right? His Word. And again, this is how almost everybody did it up until the 20th century. When things started to change. So, that's ecumenical. That's kind of some of the history of the word ecumenical. So again, when we use it, we're going to refer primarily to this gathering of Christians, gathering of Christians walking together with the same goal, right, in mind, to discuss issues of the day, what's going on, how does the church respond based off of what does the Bible say, right? And the decrees of which have found acceptance by the church in the whole world. So, going on. The next point here is Christianity spreads throughout the Roman Empire. Local councils are held with great frequency to determine orthodox belief and practice. Orthodox meaning right, the correct belief and practice. These local councils are sometimes called synod, again, so we kind of talked about this. Without the protection of Roman law, a general church-wide council wasn't possible. So you don't see representatives from Christian churches all over the Roman Empire getting together to talk about stuff when Diocletian is killing a whole bunch of Christians, right? I mean, that's just not very smart to say, let's put all of our leaders in one spot, right? So you have local gatherings of this, and a lot of that stuff's done in secret, or in hiding. But once Constantine becomes Christian, and Christianity then is legalized, then one of the first things that happens is you get this kind of a worldwide council from Christians from all over the world coming together. Okay? So, a couple of things about that as we lead up. So by the 3rd century, so 200s, the right to vote becomes limited to bishops. So before that, it was the priests, okay? And sometimes just normal lay people, right? But by the time the 200s roll around, then it's just the bishops that vote, okay? And they often adopted a Roman senatorial formula, which is a deliberative assembly wherein each bishop has equal say and rights, right? So the Pope isn't better or have more than any others. But there is a presiding bishop keeping the discussion on point. So in other words, what they do is they say, we're just going to adopt Robert's Rules of Order, right? And do parliamentary procedure. That's what kind of the Roman world does. And it works pretty well, so we're just going to adopt that. And that's how we're going to conduct our matters of business as well. The church still does that. We do. So when the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod meets in convention, we follow parliamentary procedure. Right? That's not outlined in the Bible, but that's the way that kind of our government works. We're supposed to, right? And so we do that with some additional little rules here and there, kind of, more specifically for church. So they do this kind of thing, which means that when Constantine becomes Christian, and now they get this first worldwide assembly, basically, right? This first Ecumenical Council, they're going to conduct business. All of your normal secular governmental leaders, including Constantine, would have been really familiar on this is just how you conduct business, right? So it would have followed the same kind of formula, the same kind of way of going about. Okay. So each of these 7 councils occur after Christianity is legalized. Here's an important aspect: is to called by a secular ruler. Called by a secular ruler, and they benefited society as much as the church. Now they're starting to, this is existing within increasingly a Christianized culture. But this ends up benefiting society as much as it does the church. And there'll be a little more about that in a minute. But the ecumenical councils were occasional, which means that they address specific issues of their day as they arose, which demanded attention. So it's not like they say every 10 years we're going to meet, right? They just talk about whatever. Some issue arises, and they say, we got to get this figured out. How does the church respond? What do we believe? And then how do we respond to this? And back then, again, there's religious, whether it's Christian or not, religious and secular life is so intertwined, there's really not a difference oftentimes. And so when Constantine becomes Christian, and now he's looking around at Christianity and he says, wait a minute, us Christians, we have some pretty different beliefs on who Jesus is. Is Jesus God, or is he a God? And now if I'm Christian, right, and more people are starting to jump on the bandwagon, we better get this figured out so that there isn't a kind of a civil war, right?
So these are good efforts. They may have not all resulted in good things, but these are really good efforts.
Absolutely they are. Yeah, absolutely they are. So, just like everything, can be tainted by sin, right? And this is one of the big, one of the big differences with us Lutherans and most Protestants. The difference between us and the Roman Catholics is Martin Luther said this over and over and over again, as well as some of the other reformers, is popes and councils can err, right? They can make a mistake. Okay? That doesn't necessarily mean they did make a mistake, but it means they can, because we're made up of sinful human beings. And so we can make a mistake. And the Roman Catholic Church says no, they can't. You can't make a mistake, because they say, well, if it's being led by the Holy Spirit, working through as official representatives, and if it's been confirmed by the Pope, they can't make a mistake. And we would say they can, because the sinful human nature still affects what Christians and believers do. Right? Yes, sir.
We already had some councils get on here.
Well, yeah. Yeah. For the most part of these 7 ecumenical councils, Lutheranism is going to agree with almost everything. Now, most of the stuff really, a lot of it's not an issue for us today. Okay. So it's like, well, that happened, but that's not an issue for the Christian church, regardless who you are in Idaho right now. So.
So the tradition for this was established
At the Jerusalem Council.
Council.
Absolutely. The Jerusalem Council is the basis for this. That we covered when we went through Acts, Peter and Paul, kind of representing who is the gospel for, Jews or Gentiles. And then what does it mean to be a Christian? You have to become Jewish ethnically, right, first, before you can become a Christian. In other words, you have to be circumcised, you have to follow the dietary laws, that kind of stuff. Right? So the Jerusalem Council sets the precedent for all of this.
Well, right now, there's several back and forth on the subject of abortion with Catholics. You talk to some today, and they'll say, well, it's up to the woman to choose, and then you talk to others, and they're absolutely against it because they think, like we do, that it's murder. But the Pope has not been, I'd say, he's been kind of wishy-washy on really putting a foot down and saying, until I'm thinking it's going to get better, maybe, because Nancy Pelosi would refuse Holy Communion, but then she went back there and got it anyway, so. But it's a perfect example of what you're talking about, in the fact that there can be mistakes. I think anybody of any faith in Christ is making a mistake.
The official Roman Catholic doctrine is that life begins at conception.
Yeah, exactly.
The problem isn't their doctrine on that point. The problem is sinful people that don't like it. Say, I'm going to ignore this, or try to walk a fine line.
Yeah, those people could have been on a council way back then, those kind of views.
No,
Not
Christianity.
that extreme.
Yeah, no, not really.
Because nobody even thought of that back then.
Well, abortion, almost every time in the first 500 years of Christianity, when murder is talked about in the church fathers, it's in reference to abortion.
Really?
Almost exclusively.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's not talking about murder of people, adults.
Infanticide them. Really?
Or both, but also in Germany.
And hurting somebody in the womb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the church has always been very, very,
It's already,
life begins at conception.
Yeah,
Always.
because
Even more so than the Jews in Jesus' day.
wow.
Well, John the Baptist and Jesus is a
No,
perfect
yeah.
example of that.
But, yes. Okay, so, a couple other things. These are occasional. They're all called by secular rulers, and they benefit society as much as they benefit the church. Because these things are so intertwined, you can't really separate one or the other. And again, none of them are dependent upon the present consent or even the knowledge of the Pope, of the Bishop of Rome. Okay? And they call the Bishop of Rome the Pope. Anybody know why?
No.
Where's that word come from? Anybody know?
Papa,
Papa, which is what?
I guess I do know.
Father.
I do know. I know.
Right? So the Pope, they're just calling the Pope Father, which is what you call a priest anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Papa.
But it became the Papa. Papa becomes kind of a sort of a title.
Well, could they have, these councils, could they have decided on something that the Pope of Rome, or the Bishop of Rome didn't
Yeah.
agree with?
Yes.
Then what would happen then?
It did. Well, you see, the Pope isn't present in most of these. His representatives are, and his representatives often fall on the wrong side of the decision. But then later on, the Pope says, "Well, now that I got more of a fuller explanation and understanding, my representatives made a mistake, so I'll agree." So he agreed. The papacy agrees with these. Okay, and then they use that to exert their. Now, because I agreed with it, again, that's what validates it. That's what makes it the truth, right? Rather than you had a whole bunch of other people saying this is what it is, right? Okay, so if you turn the sheet over just to the councils and the chart there, so you can see there's 7 councils. So you have the number, you have their name, okay, the date. The name also includes where they are, where they take place. You have the dates of when it happens. The president, so that's the presiding bishop. Okay, so again, all of the bishops have equal say in the conversation and an equal vote, but somebody has to be standing up front, keeping everybody on track. And so that's the president. Okay, you have the attendance, and then you have the topics. So a couple of things to notice. First, just look at the attendance. You don't have a whole lot of people there at any of these. So if 10 by 325, if 10% of the Roman Empire, approximately 6 million people, are Christians, and you only have 318 bishops there, right? That's not a lot. Okay. So, yes, sir.
Have there been other councils since then?
Yes. Yes. There have been a lot of other councils. These are these 7 are the only ecumenical councils where the East and the West are both represented and have a say. After this, sometimes the East has some and sometimes the West has some. But you would say, like the Roman Catholic Church still has it every once in a while. So Vatican II, that I mentioned earlier in the 1960s, is a Roman Catholic council. And they would call it an ecumenical council because really the only true church is their church. And so they have representatives from all over the world who pledged their allegiance to the Pope that were present and voted on stuff.
What year was that?
It was in the 60s.
Oh.
So yeah, there hasn't ever been a kind of a universal, ecumenical, universal gathering of Christians ever since this. So you've never had the heads of the Lutheran church bodies and the Baptists and Pentecostals and the Nazarenes and the Roman Catholics and the Eastern Orthodox all sitting down to say, to determine doctrine. And what does the Bible actually say? And there's lots of reasons for that. Yes, sir.
So, the Nicene Creed comes out of the first council.
The Nicene Creed comes out of the first council. So next week we'll talk all about the Nicene, or the Council of Nicaea. But yes, that's why it's called the Nicene Creed.
From Nicaea.
It's because it comes out of the Council of Nicaea. Actually, it's the Nicaea Constantinopolitan Creed, because the third article doesn't get articulated until 381. So we'll talk about that a little more next time.
And then the Athanasian comes.
The Athanasian isn't a result of a council, but that comes in the probably 500s, 600s. And it's part of a point of contention between the East and the West, because, and the same with the part with what's called the Filioque. We'll talk about that. In the Nicene Creed, that the East doesn't have a say, and so they're mad because they didn't have a seat at the table when these things were done. Right? Even though they agree with it. Well, they could agree. They don't necessarily. Okay, so we're going to look at this chart here with the 7. I mean, keep that if you can, because that'll be a nice reference just for the very basics. So next week we'll look at the First Ecumenical Council, which is in Nicaea. Constantine calls it. A little over 300 bishops are there. And we'll talk about we're not going to get to everything that they talk inside, but we'll talk about the main stuff. Okay? The main topics that we'll talk about: Arianism, okay, which again is the view that Jesus is a God. Okay? You have the celebration of Passover, Easter. When do you celebrate Easter? Okay, the dating of that. The ordination of eunuchs is a big one, actually. In fact, that's number 1. Okay. Prohibition of kneeling on Sundays from Easter to Pentecost. Yeah, that's another one. And you look at me strange, but I never, when we do the confession absolution, I kneel down, except from Easter to Pentecost.
Really?
The validity of baptism by heretics. Is it a real baptism if the person doing the baptizing isn't a real believer? In other words, if they're Arian or something else? No. Right? And then what do you do with the lapsed Christians? Okay, so, and we've touched on that a little bit too. So those were the main issues that arise. Okay? So that's what we'll talk about next time. One last sentence.
The Old Testament says that God is in charge of salvation. And Jesus referred, they sit on Moses' seat. So the glory of God is in
Right. Yep. So, and eventually, when we get to the Reformation era, we'll talk all about the papacy and why that's wrong. In fact, in the Book of Concord, if anybody has it and wants some light reading before bed, it's called the Treatise on the Power and the Primacy of the Pope. The Treatise on the Power and the Primacy of the Pope. And it's actually really good. But yeah, that's also where the Lutheran view and Lutheran stance is, if the Pope is actually placing himself on that seat in the place of God, then he is the Antichrist. Capital A Antichrist, which their definition of ecumenical actually confirms that idea when he says that my authority extends to everybody. Right, he's displacing Christ.
Can I share something like funny?
Okay.
Spanish El Papa is the Pope, but it also means the potato.
Yeah.
And Spaniards like to play with words, and I cannot pick up on other jokes, but they're known for messing with words. So like papas fritas, which are like fried French fries, are also like, fried popes.
Fried Cokes.
Verbally,
Fun.
not in writing.
Right. That's funny.
All right, let's say closing prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you again for this time. As we continue to look at how your church has dealt with various issues throughout history, grant us your blessing too. And drive us always back to the scriptures. Help us find, we'll see Christ and him crucified for the forgiveness of our sins, but also take our life of living from that grace that God has extended to us. So help us to keep the first thing, the first and most important thing, hold up before our eyes, Jesus, who is for us. In his name we pray. Amen.